When I was writing my book, Safe Movement for All Spines, the motivation for the book was very much to help people who actually live in bodies that need special care, that have received diagnoses, or maybe people are having trouble navigating traditional forms of exercise, maybe have received a diagnosis that creates fear. And I had a lot of my students and clients asking me the same questions and telling me I should write a book. So I basically wrote the book based on, my experience, what I knew, and then I backfilled by verifying that what I knew was still correct based on the research. So kind of a bass-ackwards way of writing a book that's heavily research based. I got to the hypermobility chapter and I was taught some pretty old school methods of working with a person who's in a hypermobile body, which basically is like, keep everybody within their mid-range and use light weights. And, it's almost like a fear-based methodology that still exists in a lot of environments. And every chapter I wrote, I sent out to people to just have people read it, people who actually are living in the bodies that I was writing about, and exercise physiologists, medical doctors, physical therapists, chiropractors. And so I had a lot of allied health professionals and also just regular people read every chapter in the book and took a lot of input and incorporated that because I really wanted it to be easy to use. And I got to the hypermobility chapter, and most of the people that I sent it out to were like, yeah, it's great, and there was this one person who said, that's pretty old school, and you could be doing more harm than good, because what we're finding out now is that there's a lot more to this. And so that kind of set me back on my heels, and I went, well, then I need to look at this more. And so I delved into and probably did more research on the hypermobility chapter than any other chapter in the book, because I had to really change my way of thinking. So what ended up happening out of this whole journey is that I realized that one of the people that I was working with undoubtedly had Ehlers-Danlos syndrome and didn't know it. And so I began to realize that this was probably the most important chapter in the book, because the journey for diagnosis can be decades, averaging like 20 years for someone to become diagnosed with Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility spectrum disorders. And it's really, really important, in my opinion, that all of the constellation of diagnoses, the comorbidities, that's what they're called, would be collated and looked at in a holistic way by health professionals. So I kind of embarked on this mission to bring awareness to the medical community, physical therapy community, and just people. And so that's why I'm actually sponsoring the conference, because I feel like I still work with people who definitely, need the words to advocate for themselves in the medical environment, and like to help their medical professionals connect the dots. And so then I'm just like, it's easier, I think, because after a certain time, going from one place to another, to another, to another, or trying to like hire a personal trainer to help with fitness or whatever, repeating the same story gets a little exhausting. And so I thought, if a person could just say, hey, read chapter 8 and see how that looks and see how that might apply to me in all or part. And then there's also some exercises that provide a foundation for movement in the book, with videos that are on a dedicated website. So often too, people who have just different diagnoses and different things going on with their bodies, their spines, their hips, their sacrums, there can be some other things going on. Like, it's really common for people that I work with who have scoliosis to also have hypermobility. So there's chapters about that too. And so whatever is the spine condition or the sacral or hip condition that's going on, there's a chapter about it, and people can pick up the book and just look look at it as a resource and be able to read and hopefully understand themselves a little bit better, understand what to do to move without fear. My overarching theme in the book is let's do some movement that will create a pain-free state for someone and provide a foundation from which that person can grow, can do their daily activities, can maybe do more in the movement realm. As we all know, movement's really important. So in the hypermobility chapter, I used isometrics to develop a sense of where a person's body is in space, and if we can then provide the body with a feeling of safety. So starting with isometrics and then bringing that person upright as soon as possible, and then to begin working on activities of daily living, starting with progressively loading with weights. And so progressively can mean starting quite light and then adding on functional movement patterns, things like that, that are really important. So that's the basic idea behind the book, is that it's a self-help for empowerment and also for communication. People that I work with have said, like, now I know what to ask. So I also do teacher training, and I'll train my teachers to ask questions. Like if someone is starting to present with some of the constellation of diagnoses, to ask about things like, do you have frequent UTIs? Do you have dizziness? Do you have, any of the symptoms that we know can be part of an Ehlers-Danlos or hypermobility spectrum disorder diagnosis? So that's, it's really the book, the training course, it's all about being in service to help people maybe get that diagnosis a little earlier, and to coordinate, connect the dots for the person, for their medical team. Because really, I mean, one of the responses I got back, especially from the person in the story in chapter 8, was like, I don't need one more diagnosis. And so she was really resistant to even pursuing that. But then later on, she was like, yeah, she says, I can see similarities in my daughters. And, my deal was, that's the overarching diagnosis. And so all of these little diagnoses along the way were sort of the breadcrumbs on the trail. And the importance of someone getting diagnosed early, I feel, is that they can then receive adequate medical intervention for some of the issues that a person with hypermobility spectrum disorder, Ehlers-Danlos, faces. So that's why I'm here, and that's why I do what I do.